Yep, you're good.
Are we all, is it all
Yeah,
good?
yeah. I think we're just confirming that it's being recorded now, Chair. Yeah.
Oh, good. So we're on record. Are there any apologies, please? No apologies. We'll move on. Declarations of interest other than ones you've already made in the past relating to matters before the committee today. Not. I'm working with two computers here, so forgive me if I'm looking away because I've got the minutes on another bigger screen. Public forum petitions and deputations. Well, we're not in public session. I don't think anybody else is able to dial in. So there's none of those. Confirmation of minutes from the 22nd of September. Somebody who was present during that meeting like to move.
Happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Nicol. Thank you, Lloyd. Is there any discussion on that? All those in favour of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Get done. Right, we're on to item 1, consents division activity and performance. So,
Thank you, Chair. I think Bruce Halligan's able. Yeah, you're online, Bruce, aren't you? You'll be able to go through the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, councillors. Hopefully you can hear me and see my ugly face as well. Okay. Sorry, like Councillor Cook, I'll be flicking a little bit between screens, so I apologise if I look away at times. Report itself, hopefully is reasonably self-explanatory, and I'll take it as read, but perhaps highlight a couple and update a couple of items since it was written. Firstly, sort of down the bottom of page 10, just around general workload in the team. Has been quite a busy period, and as is also mentioned in the report, we have the team all working from home at the moment. Due to the really good work from our IT division, we're able to work pretty effectively from home. We possibly lose a little bit of the direct customer interface, but you know, we're trying to deal with customer queries as efficiently as we can, and that's generally the response is going okay in that respect. And things are moving through the system reasonably well, pretty much able to work as pretty much full efficiency as compared to being in the office, possibly losing a little bit of that customer interface. On page 11 of your report, I've talked about recruitment of staff in the consents area. We have completed our recruitment process. Two of our existing team are stepping up to new roles and more advanced roles, and we've also recruited an experienced staff member from another local council who brings some good skill sets around things like hazardous substances and some broader knowledge of Southland. They will have a little bit to learn in the consenting space. Pretty confident that they'll be a really good recruit for the team. Sort of moving through, another thing I would like to highlight and thank council for supporting really was some training that we did, situational awareness, safety and tactical communications course that consent staff and a number of other parts of the organisation undertook just before Christmas. On the South was included in that, and it was basically a course, for want of a better word, around de-escalation of the customer interface, particularly in the field. And I've done training of that type myself in the past, but this one is really, really good, and I think everybody got a lot out of it. Pretty timely as well, so really appreciate the council's support for that training and lots of positive feedback from team members. We've got a big range of people across the team in terms of their experience levels with dealing with people one-on-one and in the field and that sort of thing. So lots of people got a lot of really good learnings out of that. So thank you very much for supporting that. Has been quite a busy period with the applications lodged, moving through the top of page 12, quite a good number of those, and that's sort of continued in early 2022 as well. A couple of updates on some of those applications. The bottom of page 12, they're in the publicly notified application stage. We do have a number of hearings pending. We've got 4 hearings coming up in the next month and a half. And our default on those is going to be via Zoom. We don't have massive numbers of people who wanted to be heard, but there's certainly some important issues to consider in those hearings, but we should be able to manage that effectively through the Zoom process, subject to suitable advice and planning being given to those parties. The Alpine Group application, the first one on that schedule at the bottom of page 12, number of submissions to that, and that's heading to a hearing in late March before an independent commissioner. The next one I'd probably like to mention on that schedule, right at the bottom of page 12, is the Southport application for their proposed capital dredging works. Again, that was a publicly notified application, and we've had a number of submissions, so that's at this stage scheduled to be heard in mid-April before 2 independent commissioners. Obviously, the independent commissioner aspect for that one is reflecting Environment Southland's Southport shareholding, make sure it's an objective decision-making process. A couple of the others towards the bottom of that schedule on the top of page 13, while they were limited notified, we've had no submissions, so we'll be able to progress those through and make decisions at staff level without a hearing. Sort of moving through, highlighting on page 14 some of the future forecasted activities for the team. General workload is expected to be continue and probably slightly increase this year. Intensive winter grazing is obviously going to be an element of that, and there's been some previous dialogue on that, and obviously we're going to continue to work on that process moving forward, and also to connect with the other councils in that space who have also got similar work programs. I've mentioned commercial surface water activities, of which the Alpine Group application is one of those. There's some strong scrutiny on that, as I'm sure you're aware. And so that's anticipated to be another area that will generate some further applications this year, and also some scrutiny on the process from a number of parties. And we're also keeping track of the progress on the Natural and Built Environments Act and general legislative reform in general, as I'm sure you all are as well. Trying to make sure we are connected and planning for the future around that. And the Ministry of the Environment's been running some useful regular updates on where the direction of travel is heading with legislative reform. And obviously there's an opportunity, and we'll be connecting with Rachel Miller's team on providing feedback on some of that at the moment, and we've been involved in workshopping that. So we're certainly making sure we're keeping abreast of the direction of travel on that, albeit that there's still a number of matters to clarify coming through those processes. So those are probably the key points to highlight from that previous report. Mr. Chairman, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Bruce. Do we have any, Lloyd, Councillor Lloyd?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 things. On page 12, you've got A&N Stalker wetland modification. Are you able to give a little bit more flavour of that? I see that the application was withdrawn. So just because wetlands is a big topic at the moment. And my second question really is related to the intensive winter grazing. I probably don't have the same view as what you've written here, that customers are waiting for, and there's going to be an influx. I probably have a view that most people are going to wait and see and hide for as long as they can. So I'm just not too sure whether that is going to be the case.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Councillor McKellen. Yeah, 2 good questions. On the Stalker application, that was a application from a farming landowner to modify an existing wetland, which is known locally as the Sobig wetland, up in northern Southland, to create an access track between 2 parts of their property. And we had a pre-application meeting with that party. There was some opposition to that activity, and they opted not to proceed with the application.
Thank you.
Second comment with regard to intensive winter grazing, yes, It's a difficult issue to predict, and obviously to some extent this will depend on the timing of the intensive winter grazing provisions kicking in, which at the moment is May 2022, but there's been some consultation process underway and has been some as yet unconfirmed suggestion that that date could be deferred, but I don't know that as yet till later in 2022. And you may well be right. Some parties have contacted us and are keen to lodge applications. Probably those tend to be at this stage at the larger end of the spectrum. But you may well be right that people may well seek to only need to comply when they're legally required to do so, which is understandable from their point of view. So I guess at some stage we would expect that there will be a significant number of intensive winter grazing applications lodged on the basis of the regime as it stands at the moment. But the exact timing of that is a little bit difficult to predict. So you may well be right on that, and my content may well be incorrect. It's a bit of an unknown.
I understand that. If I may, Mr. Chairman, if I may follow on, it's very hard to put in a process halfway through a growing season, and I wonder whether the application should be open for the coming season, so the consents are in place before the crop goes in the ground. The way that reads is if it's going to land on top of established crops and then get a consent. And I just wonder whether have I picked it up right, or is there a better way of actually introducing it ahead of the planting season paddock, and then take that right through, and then expresses itself through the feeding in the following winter?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, the timing of the proposed activity to some extent comes down to the applicant, but you're quite right. We obviously want to work in a way that reflects general farming practice in the region. The timing content on that page 14 probably reflects the time that is indicated in the regulations as they stand at the moment. Somebody can apply at any stage, and we can frame a consent on that basis.
Thank you.
Councillor Beard.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. A good report, Bruce, and yeah, good to read. I just got down to page 14 and was a little bit interested in, obviously, MFE consultations around the NES. Do you know how they're progressing with the stock exclusion, or more particularly the maps that they've been working on? Are they making any progress on the consensus over the low slope maps?
To you, Mr. Chairman, yeah, the slope issue in particular has been subject to considerable discussion, and it is being progressed through the Ministry for Environment. We've had some level of update on a confidential basis through the Consents Managers Forum. So I guess what I can say at this stage is those matters are coming under considerable close scrutiny at Ministry for Environment level, and they certainly are making progress. We don't have a definitive time frame for release of decisions around that as yet.
Thank you, Bruce. I just note on page 11, top of page 11, the Mataura water conservation process that we're going through at the moment. There's been print and radio media commentary on this, and I'd have to say it was actually moderately positive. And where are we with that from our point of view?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we have a dedicated project team led by experienced consultant Bianca Sullivan, who's doing a really good job in leading that work program for Environment Southland, with support from a number of teams, including AIS, obviously. So at this stage, there's engagement with the affected consent holders who have formed a group, and working with that group, obviously looking to confirm the data components of the work stream, and endeavour to run as a collaborative process as possible to seek to address the overall issue. So there's good positive ongoing engagement with that group, and looking to continue to progress down that work program.
If I may, Chair, I think it's probably your question. It's probably timely that we could bring back a briefing on the Mataura project. So I'll take that as a task to come back to
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Yes, Chairman Nicol.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I've been trying to put my electronic hand up. It keeps disappearing, but yeah, just a couple of issues. I'm assuming that the applications for intensive winter grazing for next season would be in main larger properties that their normal operations are more than the 50 hectares that the government's put in there. And the other one is interested to see we're still getting applications for dairy expansion. I guess is the expansion small enough to fit in to actually comply with the NES, which has very limited ability to expand?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, answer that later question. Chairman Hall has highlighted the issue that's really triggered the requirement for this matter to go to a hearing by an independent commission. So be careful I don't say anything to prejudice that process, but yeah, certain types of activities under the NES and our plan can proceed as of right, but when they're not within that category, they need to go through that process. So the matter that Chairman Holds highlighted was a key issue that the Commissioner will need to consider as part of that process.
Right, I don't see any other hands up. So I can, unless there's any more commentary or questions,
I'm happy to move.
I'll thank the Consent Manager for his presentation, and moved by Lloyd. The recommendation seconded by Councillor McPhail. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone against? Carried. Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
We move to item 2, which is the Manager of Compliance, which is Donna Ferguson. Good morning, Donna.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to present this report at today's meeting, which I table as read. Apologies if I glance sideways. I have my report on the second screen. Just want to highlight a couple of items from the report before I open for questions. So there have been some concerns regarding reasons within the compliance team, which are currently being addressed. 3 additional roles will come into the team, being senior roles in the next few weeks, which we hope will help with retention of current staff and will enable us to backfill with new team members. And recruitment is underway for our current vacancies and looking very positive at this stage. Aerial monitoring for dairy discharge permits is underway as of tomorrow for around 300 consents. Unfortunately, these haven't been undertaken cross-divisionally as hoped with other ES departments and EPA due to restrictions with the helicopter service that we use under COVID at the moment, but we will be doing these flights at a later date once we're able to. And finally, fish screenings. This involves current resource consents, which may have previously been compliant. However, due to applying new NEWA guidelines, may not be. This is a condition of these consents which compliance is not monitored historically. So we're working with ECAN to develop a proactive monitoring program which will run over 5 years to ensure that we can work with the consent holders to make sure that they are compliant with fish screen requirements and also with benefiting from ECAN's experiences and knowledge and training base. Open to any questions.
Thank you, Donna. Just about the fish screening, is that likely to require any major changes to facilities on farms in Southland?
So this is around surface water take, Mr. Chair, for abstraction for water. And so we've identified a number of consents that have a condition to have a suitable fish screen in place to prevent fish being sucked up. There will be some infrastructure changes for those consents possibly.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Donna, just a query really, or a clarification as to what 10 significant non-compliant issues, obviously with discharge permit inspections, just what actually justifies a non-compliant? To what extent does that have to be an issue? I mean, obviously it's serious.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we do have a grading system for dairy discharge permit and for a lot of our inspections. A grade 10 significant non-compliance on a dairy situation would involve a lot of ponding, over-application on site, and those cases generally tend to filter through to enforcement actions afterwards as well. So they are the higher end of the non-compliance.
Right. Is that getting better, or is that actually just what we normally get?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is a dramatic increase from what we've seen in other years. There is a huge increase in general compliance around the dairy discharge inspections. 10, still not an ideal number, but much better from other seasons so far.
Thanks, Donna.
Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may have picked it up just because your sound's not that good where I'm sitting from, but did you say you're going to, and there was a press release yesterday, you were going to do aerial flights, but did I pick it right that you were going to delay them until later? Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are undertaking dairy inspections starting tomorrow, but we were also at the same time hoping to do some pre-cultivation winter grazing observations. So those flight parts will be delayed until a later time. We can take other teams with us. At the moment, we're limited to the number of people in the helicopter.
I'm probably of the view that the situation we are in is going to be for quite some time, and the season will go quite fast. From a farming perspective and a interaction with the public, you know, I think it would be really good if we could find a way through that that process, that we could actually do the flights and get some baseline data out there early rather than later in the season, is my personal view.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are also doing cultivation flights, which will be undertaken by our catchment integration team. So they will also be looking at those pre-winter grazing issues as well. So it just means we've had to do 2 lots of flights rather than trying to get it all done in one.
The current situation with COVID and the organisation approach we've taken, not to stop the work. So I think we can still do stuff. It's just more challenging and requires a little bit more thought. So I think if there's a delay, it'll only be a slight delay. I still feel confident that if we're able to do the flights. It just means there's more thought that needs to go into the process of how we make sure that the mitigations and the measures are fit for purpose. So I'm confident we'll be able to do it.
Okay, thank you.
I just noticed I'm driving through central and northern Southland last few days, and that the rivers are at really low levels, and we're, dare I suggest, we're at a level of drought coming upon us. And the irrigators are going in most places I've seen them. So are we reaching cut-off levels, or we're approaching cut-off levels at the moment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there are some which are coming close to cut-off for abstraction levels. These are being monitored by the working group for the water shortage issue at the moment, and being monitored by our tech team at the same time.
Thank you. Councillor McPhail.
Yeah, I was just going to give a wee bit of a heads up, obviously with killing space, and we come to the same time each year in regards to farmers are starting to move stock off the farms. We're already seeing some issues with space at the early stage, and obviously we don't know where COVID's going to, how that's going to react into the workforce, and hopefully we're hoping for the best. But it's just one of those things. It's always a good heads up just with clients and just regards people trying to get stock off. There's obviously going to be stress again, and just to understand, we as a council need to know what's going on with processing plants and things like that too, just to make sure we've got a pretty good feel of how everything's going out in the country, because it's I know people are trying their best and it can get pretty stressful. Certainly was stress last year. We were in a drought, whereas this year we're not. So we're in a better place. But I thought I'd put that out there so we'll know what's going on in the community.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. If farmers are going to retain stock and they're short of feed and short of water, it's going to be more difficult for them. Chairman Horrell.
Well, actually, Lloyd's probably been indicating before me. Do you want to take Lloyd first, then I'll go?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
No, Lloyd Esler.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I had questions about the priority 5. Just to wonder if there was an update on how the whitebait stands are looking, and are we working with DOC on compliance there, and what exactly the South Coast inspections are? Can I get a wee bit of detail about that? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So whitebait inspections this year, we've had around 51 non-compliances on whitebait stand inspections, and they are tending this season to be around stands not being in safe condition and not having correct labels on them. Those are currently being addressed by our team at the moment. South Coast structures revolve around slipways and boat sheds around the southern coastline. So areas like Cozy Nook, Bluff, and those areas, as well as some discharge pipes, which we inspect annually. And sorry, there was a third part which I missed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. Was that answer your questions?
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Horrell.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman, and yeah, good to see those flights being publicised, because I've been on them before, and even if it's a winter grazing flight, if you're in a fixed wing or a helicopter, you can see other things, and I think it's just probably good that people are aware that we are out there looking. And the freezing works has been mentioned. The throughput appears to be quite slow. I heard that Alliance were only able to man 2 chains in the last few days, and that's before we get Overcron. So the drought, if it doesn't break, and that throughput will put stress on in some places. We are expecting people to do the right thing environmentally. So it's good publicity that we are doing the flights.
Can I just clarify? My understanding is we're not using drones. We're still getting these ad hoc reports from farmers saying Environment South and out there flying drones over our property.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. We're not using drones for monitoring at this stage. We have historically used a drone with the consent holder's permission on an incident response on a property, but not for aerial monitoring.
And
Thank you.
just to be really clear here, because I know it kind of gets debated, we would never put a drone in the air without the permission of the landowner. So in terms of monitoring approach, so I don't know how we maybe we need to update our FAQs to some degree, so that just assures people that if they see a drone, it's highly unlikely it'll be linked to environment safety.
Would it be appropriate that we put out a media release about that as well?
Yeah, we could look at that for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
With regard to that comment about the drones, could I just ask, when we use a drone, is it marked? Is it recognisably do we have colours? Do we have a livery that we can put on our drone so that people do know? I know, I mean it seriously, actually.
Yeah, it's a good question, and not something I've got an answer for today, but certainly we could explore that if we've got a kind of a generic drone. If there's a way of distinguishing it, we could look at that. Sure.
Thank you. Do we have any more commentary or questions for the compliance manager, Donna?
I wonder if I could just gauge the council's views on where the development of the compliance monitoring and enforcement strategy. I wondered if it was a time just to take you through what we're trying to achieve with that. We'd like to bring the draft of that back to you, and really the basis of the strategy is it's an operational strategy. It's how we're going to need to respond to the issues or challenges of compliance monitoring now and into the future, given that we've got over 5,000 consents to monitor and different types of consents and different challenges that go with that. How we develop our future in terms of managing data to help us with our monitoring programs, and also how our customer relationship stands and what are the customer principles that we want to continue to apply while still being a regulator. And I think this is an opportunity for the council. I know there have been questions around how do we manage all these numbers and how do we prioritise. And so this strategy gives us a good framework, well, hopefully give us a good framework that will set us on a clear path for the next 5 to 10 years. So I'm quite keen to bring this through to the regulatory committees, maybe through a workshop initially, or some sort of briefing. But I just thought I'd highlight that's a key piece of work that's going to come through in the not too distant future, along with our 5-year plans. I think I've spoken about this before, that we're going to bring you our forward work program. Some of it we're going to need to gear up to deliver, and figure out how we're going to deliver some of these things. And then lastly, what's on the calendar to bring forward to you is our annual priorities. So I know you've got 5 priorities in terms of compliance work that we report back on to you, but every year my intention is to review those priorities in terms of where our focus should be. So that's another piece of work that's going to come through to the regulatory committee, potentially by the next meeting, if not the meeting after.
Thank you, Paul. I think that there's quite a volume of work and information there. I think you're right that it deserves a workshop. We should probably plan a workshop in the near future to go through those matters you've raised.
Okay, that's a good feedback. Thank you.
Is there any further commentary or questions?
For you, Mr. Chairman, sorry, I was just going to say, connecting to Councillor McPhail's really good comment about awareness of what's going on in the community and the rural community. Fully endorse that, trying to sort of elevate the team's awareness around those sorts of issues, and people being connected to the pressures on communities and current topical issues, things like killing space and water shortages and things like that are really important that consents and compliance team are fully aware of and cognizant of when they're dealing with their customers as well. So yes, fully endorse that comment from Councillor McPhail.
Thank you. Do we have somebody to move the recommendation, please?
Happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
Who was that? Sorry, missed that one.
That was me, Nicol.
Oh, Nicol, thank you.
Yeah.
Seconded by Councillor Guyton. All those in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? It's carried. Thank you for your report, Don.
Mr. Chair.
Item 10 was extraordinary and urgent business, and I'm not aware that there is any. And item 11, public excluded business, I don't have any of that in my schedule. So that is the end of the meeting, unless somebody tells me that I've missed something. All good. Okay, thank you for your attendance virtually and your participation in this meeting. And that's now concluded.
Thank you, Chair.